12-year NFL veteran, former offensive lineman for the Philadelphia Eagles. You hear his work. Compass Media, he's going to be calling the game this weekend, Eagles and Chiefs. And that's Brian Baldinger. He joins us now on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Will be calling the game nationally. A chance to see Andy Reid up against his old team, Baldy, and a lot of questions regarding the current Eagles coach. If you look back and say, should the Eagles just stay the course and stuck with Andy Reid?
Well, I'm looking forward to getting to Kansas City this weekend to see this game. I've got a great deal of respect for Andy Reid, great deal of respect. Doing a good job in Kansas City. And, look, he had 14 years in Philadelphia, and when, they made the decision to cut ties, it was probably the right decision. I mean, Clark Hunt, the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs, had a plane, picking up Andy Reid like literally 5 hours after he was, his contract was retired here. So
right.
The Chiefs are fortunate to have had him, and the Eagles had a little bit of a pop, when Chip Kelly came in, and nobody was really complaining then that first year in the playoffs and all that. So these things happen. Coaches move on. Mike Shanahan got fired in Oakland and won championships in Denver. I mean, this stuff happens, and it's just it's the life of a coach. Andy Reid seems to be quite content in Kansas City right now.
Yeah, he's doing a great job out there. He's won 60% of his games as an NFL head coach. We were talking, Baldy, before you came on that I guess Belichick's number one. I don't know who number two is, but Andy's got to be in that conversation when you look around the league right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, Pete Carroll and Andy, all those guys have, Andy stood the test of time. This is 18 or 19 years for him, whatever it is. You stand the test of time. It's not an easy profession. And, he's been at the top of it. He's got his teams, consistently, competing for playoff spots. And, his debut last Thursday night was, his team was ready to play. And not many teams can beat the Patriots in the trenches the way the Chiefs did, but they did that on both sides of the ball, I thought, last weekend. And it was a good debut. It was just one game. And, Andy understands the perspective on this thing, but he's just got that one thing missing from his resume, and that's a Super Bowl win. And, sometimes it's elusive. It took Bill Cowher 15 years to get his.
Yeah.
It can be elusive sometimes. You need a little bit of luck and the right quarterback and all those kind of things. But, Andy's going to keep chopping wood as he always does.
Brian Baldinger's with us. I want to break down some of this game and some of the things you saw from the Eagles in their game against Washington. Let's start with the defense because very aggressive. Jim Schwartz brought some pressure, but he's got more talent to bring that pressure this year. Did you see a different Jim Schwartz in the way that he called his defense on Sunday in Washington?
It's kind of hard, to be honest with you, Mike, to answer that question because every game is different and different circumstances. Look, 3rd and 6. In the fourth quarter and the Eagles clinging to, a little bit of a lead. I mean, he gambled. He brought the house. He brought a 7-man pressure, both safeties. And, Jalen Mills came up with an interception. It was a bad throw by Kirk Cousins. Jalen Mills didn't really play it perfectly. He played a little soft. Those things, you just hope when the band plays that your band playing, And, his man was playing on the interception, but he had Jamison Crowder open over the middle, and if he hits him, it's a touchdown. The Eagles are losing in the fourth quarter. So he gambled quite a bit on Sunday, a little bit more than maybe Eagle fans think that he does. He also marched out 4 number 1 draft picks on the defensive line that, forced some bad throws. So, he's got more talent. He's got 4 number 1 draft picks. He's got 2 high number 2 picks in his 8-man rotation there. Not many teams have committed the type of resources that the Eagles have committed to their defensive line. So is it a finished product? By no means, but they know where the money is right now. The money spent on that defensive line, they've got to come up big, and they did at times on Sunday.
Yeah, Brandon Graham, I don't know that he's underappreciated or if people just don't understand, but in the pantheon of great pass rushers in this league, where is he in your conversation?
Well, it's not always about sacks. There's guys, Justin Houston, you're going to see this week. He had 22 in 1 year. He's playing good right now. He's healthy. Sacks are a nice number. Brandon had 5.5, but it's really about consistent pressure. And consistently, regardless of who Brandon Graham lines up again, and a lot of it last Sunday was against Morgan Moses, who's a quality right tackle in this league. He can back up right tackles in this league and left tackles. He can back them up into the laps of quarterbacks, and it makes guys like Kirk Cousins, who are good quarterbacks, do things that look irrational at times. And pressure does things to guys. When they have to move off their spot, move out of the pocket, things that they don't really like to do, he can make those quarterbacks uncomfortable. And he's a quality player. Last week, when they played the 4 number 1 draft picks, he played inside at defensive tackle. I think he gets a little lost in there myself. I think he's better on the outside. But, Jim Schwartz knows a whole lot more about it than I do.
What do you think the defense will, or how much do you think the defense will lose without Darby? I know we didn't get to see a lot of him, but just what his presence meant for Jim Schwartz in terms of his play calling, do you think losing a player like that, does that change the coordinator's game plan?
I think so. I mean, they have a decision to make right now. I mean, they played Jalen Watkins out at left corner. I just don't think you can line up with Jalen Watkins at corner in this league. I mean, he's a depth player, and he can finish a game like he did, but I don't think you can line up. And so then you go, okay, do you put Patrick Robinson out there, who is your starting nickel, and then who do you put inside? You move Malcolm Jenkins in there and then play Corey Graham and McLeod at safety. It's a trickle-down effect. And he was their best corner, and I think there was a lot of confidence in what he can do and what he has done in this league. And I think it's a big loss. There's no question about it. How they cover it up right now, we may not know until Sunday afternoon, but it's the first thing I'm looking at on third down for the Chiefs. On the first 3rd and 7, I'm anxious to see who's in the slot covering, Tyreek Hill or whatever other monster they have in there right now.
Yeah, I want to get your opinion on him because that's one thing about the Chiefs that is impressive is the speed they have. And Hill, the way they get him the ball, it seemed, and I was concerned with how the Eagles were going to match up with Crowder. And I know Crowder wasn't had the hip problem and didn't really have a great game because, as you mentioned, Malcolm Jenkins is very good in the slot, but those small, speedy guys seem to give them more problems. And Hill, he seems like a nightmare matchup for this secondary.
Well, he is for anybody. And Andy Reid has 2 great players to work with, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. They're great players. And Andy designs plays for both of them. And they use the speed and the threat of Tyreek's speed to basically change coverage. And you see it all the time. He did it against the Patriots last Thursday night. You have got to respect his ability that he can run by anybody in this league. I think he's the fastest player in the league. I know John Ross ran that time at 40, but he's not really playing. I think he's the fastest player in the league. And if you don't believe me, just watch the bad angles that people constantly take on this guy. And, and then they put him in the screen, they put him in the screen game. They line him up in the backfield. They run him on go routes. They fake bubble screens to him, and they hit Travis Kelce coming across. He does a lot with them to create space for other players. He is a major, major chess piece for Andy Reid right now.
Brian Baldinger is with us. He'll call the game for Compass Media nationally, Eagles and Chiefs. We don't talk a lot about the special teams, specifically the kicker, but Sturgis out, pretty consistent last year. I know he missed an extra point this year, but then he bangs home a couple more. But you tweeted out yesterday that you thought the Eagles found a prize here with Jake Elliott.
Well, I consulted with a guy that I'm not going to mention his name, but he is the kicking specialist in this whole business, college and pro. Nobody knows more about him. He coaches one of the best in the league right now. And I consulted with him, and he said that he flat out is one of the best 32 kickers in the league. He's got a good leg. If you watch him on his kickoffs in Cincinnati, he had 3 that were returned. None of them passed the 18-yard line. The rest of them were touchbacks, either out of the end zone or deep in the end zone. He's got a good leg, a powerful leg. He's not a big guy. You always worry about guys that aren't necessarily big, especially in November, December. But I think he's going to be good on kickoffs. I think it's going to really help their kickoff coverage. And his field goals, he's been good. I mean, but he's got to go do it now. He's never kicked in a regular season game. There's a different pressure to that. He beat, if you'll remember, when he was kicking at Memphis, he beat Temple at the end of the game to win 16-13 a few years back. He's kicked at Lincoln Financial Field before. So I'm not against Caleb Sturgis at all. I mean, he's a quality player, but these kickers in this league, to break in, sometimes you have to get cut. I mean, David Akers was cut. Adam Vinatieri was cut. They all went over to Europe and kicked. Sometimes you got to find a way to get in, and sometimes it's an injury that gets you in, and then you can prove yourself.
Hey, Baldy, moving forward with Carson Wentz, I want to get your opinion on Number one, how he played, and number two, how the pass protection from the running back spot is going to really make or break maybe some of these play calls on the offense, because it seems that they struggled in that area of the game on Sunday.
Well, Darren Sproles was the best. You know, I mean, he flipped Mason, the linebacker, upside down, and Carson didn't really trust it, and he scrambled and ended up getting sacked. The quarterback, ultimately, the quarterback has to trust the protection. And the running backs are a big part of it. Tight ends are at times as well. And it's a weakness right now. It's been a weakness of LeGarrette Blount's game. It was a weakness in New England, but it was covered up because they had Tom Brady. And teams were just wary of blitzing Tom Brady and how he could just slice them up. I don't think people feel that way about Carson yet. But they wouldn't have won the game without Carson, on Sunday. I mean, the throw to Aguilar was a breakdown play, and he made it happen. I mean, I don't know if they would have scored on that opening drive if Carson doesn't, make that throw and avoid all the pressure like Houdini. He gets them out of a lot of bad plays. He also it's just a fine line, Mike. I can't tell, what Carson should or should not do at times. It's a fine line between staying in that pocket an extra tick and waiting for Zach Ertz to come open over the middle and taking off and trying to buy time. And so it's something he's just going to have to feel and learn as he goes along. But he's fearless. He's an incredible competitor, and they wouldn't have won the game without him Sunday.
Yeah, obviously, big game for him. You played on the offensive line. A lot of people thought the Eagles' offensive line, Baldy, would be a strength for this team. Are you starting to look at them and saying maybe we over-evaluated some of these guys? Are you worried at all with this Eagle offensive line?
No, I think they're a good group. I mean, they didn't play in the preseason. So, I mean, I said it all preseason. They didn't play enough snaps. And they've got a whole new running back tandem back there, and they got to get used to these guys. And LeGarrette Blount, you got to get used to your starting tailback. He didn't carry it a lot to begin with, but they needed to play more. Look, you play the second half of the game without Jason Peters, you're not going to be as good. I mean, he's just a difference maker in the run game. And so Big V played fine. He'd like to have one or two snaps back, but all of them had one or two snaps that they'd like to have back. But a lot of that is just rust from not playing and not playing together. I have a lot of confidence in this group. I think it's a good group. And, I think they're going to run the ball better as you move on. This is a really good defensive front from the Chiefs. So it's a good test for them. But they got some guys. They got some guys inside now that are good football players. That Chris Jones from Mississippi State. Now he looks a lot like. To be honest with you, he looks a lot like Fletcher Cox. He's bigger than Fletcher, taller than Fletcher, but he runs like him. He's got power like Fletcher. Same school, reminds me a lot of Fletcher.
Hey, on the same front, we talked about losing Darby for Philly. How about with Barry out? What changes with Kansas City's defense? Because he's a hell of a player, man. He is.
And you can't. Bob Sutton's a really good defensive coordinator, and Eric Berry is. I don't know. It makes me tear up when I think about this guy. He'd come back from cancer twice. You're the inspirational guy that he is. Comes out the same year as Earl Thomas, and they were 1-2, and they're still 1-2, the best safeties in football. He's a phenomenal player. You can't coach the instinct. Sorensen will go in there, and he'll play for him. Ron Parker will play for him. They're going to line up, and they'll have two good safeties that can play in this league. But Eric Berry, on the play, he was covering Gronk one-on-one when he tore his Achilles. I mean, there's not many guys that even think about lining up on Gronk one-on-one. Eric Berry is just one of the few guys that are capable of doing something like that. It's a tremendous loss, and it's an inspirational loss to that team. You just can't find Eric Berry very, very often in this business.
No, he's very good, and so is the Kansas City Chief offensive line. Kareem Hunt got the headlines, but is Hunt an explosive player, or is this offensive line not getting enough credit?
Well, they played very well on Thursday. I mean, when you look at what they have, I mean, Laurent Duvernay-Tardif from Montreal, Canada, never really played football before, is an up-and-coming player. The center, is Mitch Morris is a hell of a football player. I mean, he's one of the top, and he can always find a center. He found this one. I mean, they just knocked the New England Patriots all over the place, inside. And so he does it with extra tight ends. He does it with a fullback. He does it at the point of attack. But Kareem Hunt is a quality back. Everybody knew it coming out of Toledo. He runs with power. to be beat out Chikandrick West for the backup spot, and Chikandrick West was the talk of Kansas City 2 years ago.
Yeah,
him and Spencer Ware. So he's good, and you saw the 75-yard touchdown catch in the passing game. You got to worry about him all over the field. Andy will find some matchups for him in the passing game against some linebackers as well.
Eagles seemingly have their hands full. Andy Reid is Chiefs on Sunday against the Eagles, and you can hear the game, of course, 97.3 ESPN. Brian Baldinger will call it for Compass Media as you get a chance to see the Eagles up close. And obviously, this was a team last year that had really big problems putting the ball down the field. Do you think they have answered a lot of the issues weapons-wise? Did you like what you saw from the new guys?
Well, they started the first play of the season throwing the ball down the field to Torrey Smith. They didn't complete it, but 2 plays later, they got a 58-yard touchdown pass. The ball's going down the field. Carson's got an incredible arm. The last thing to really develop for any quarterback, I don't care if his name is Troy Aikman or whoever, is the deep ball. It's hard to practice, hard to really practice with the same intensity that you play with the same speed. You're just not going to have guys run 100% in practice, 60 yards down the field for Carson to throw. It's hard to practice. And so they took some deep shots in the game. They missed on them, but, they're still pushing it down the field. It's going to keep the safeties back. And when you have Torrey on the outside, you're going to take 2 or 3 shots a game. For Aguilar or, anybody else here, they're going to take some deep shots. So it's in the game plan. Carson loves them. He loves to throw it deep. So I think it's going to come around.
Aguilar, Ertz, both of them had big games, and we'll see how they factor in. We know that Ertz has been one of them guys we've been waiting for, and he had a big game to start the season. He normally ends the season the way he started, so maybe that's a good sign. And it was good to see Aguilar come around. I don't know that you could put full trust in him yet, but at least he got off to a good start. That's better than the alternative. He was the leading target man on Sunday.
He showed signs. He showed signs that he was a different player. He looked a lot more like the guy that everybody saw coming out of USC 3 years ago than what we saw in the first 2 years. So that's a good sign for Eagle fans. It's a good sign for Nelson because confidence is everything in this business.
Yeah.
And the only way you get it is by playing and playing well.
Hey, Ball, did you check out the 30 for 30 last night? Did you see that at all?
No, I didn't know. What was it on?
The 1987 strike season was and it was a lot about the Redskins. They featured a lot of players from the Redskins, but they featured that the Redskins-Cowboys game and that a lot of the Cowboys guys had crossed, and I think you were on that Cowboys team, correct?
Yeah, I didn't cross, though. I held the picket. Yeah, I held it firm.
I didn't know if you had crossed or not, but I know that there was a lot. The way the documentary put it out was that there was a lot of tension in Dallas because the owner was kind of holding your pensions over your head a little, or your annuities over your head, and it really made it like it was the Wild Wild West for a couple of weeks there.
Well, it was 30 years ago, but I remember it was tense. It was tense in the locker room. They kept all the scab players. Even when the strike ended, they kept them in the locker room, and we were sharing lockers with guys that were scabs, and there were fights in there.
Wow.
And, the pickets, guys that crossed the picket line were not highly thought of, even though there were some really good players and big names for the Cowboys. So I would say tense would be a word that doesn't really describe the intensity of it.
Well, yeah, you should check it out because they really featured the Redskins, and they showed some wild scenes of the guys getting off the bus and the players that were picking in, just really giving them guys a hard time. And the big topic of the piece was the Redskins scab players did not get Super Bowl rings, and they felt like they were a part of them winning the Super Bowl, and they felt like they should have got rings. That was really the story.
Yeah, you're not going to get any sympathy from the veteran players on that team. I know that.
Yeah. Well, it was a great piece. You should check that out because I know you lived it. So good stuff there. And, of course, Baldy, always great stuff breaking down the tape. And this weekend, Compass Media has Eagles-Chiefs, 1 o'clock. And we'll listen for that call. Thanks, Baldy.
Okay, thanks, Mike. You bet. Anytime.